What's going on, guys? Welcome to The Hustle, episode 1. Today, I've got 3 really great guests for you. They're all super lifestyle focused, not necessarily out there for the social clout, not necessarily out there for money even per se. They're just here to make their lifestyle better, and they're working towards a goal. They're super passionate, super driven, and I think you guys are all going to really feel the passion when they're talking about what they like to do. Anyway, I'll leave all their details and descriptions in the show notes or the description below, and I just want you to stick around, listen to what these people have to say, and I'll see you at the end. Alrighty, so here we are, episode 1. Alright, I've got my good friend Sarah Klimek here, and we're here to talk with you guys about kind of what she's into, what her goals are, what her passion is, and why she is that way. What's her story, you know? And so I know that you're really passionate about like food and like everything surrounded that, food health. And I really wanted to ask you, like, why food? Like, what's your background with it? What's your story? What made you come to that as like your passion, as your goal? So like, if you could just give us like some like background on that.
I'm a student at UVM. And one of the classes that really interested me specifically was when I took food and culture with Teresa Morris, who's a professor in the anthropology department. And we talked a lot about our relationship with food as Americans versus different cultures, and how America really relies on a convenience aspect of culture, demanding everything, instant gratification, demanding food, and kind of forcing ourselves to eat really makes out of cooking. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I found a lot of my friends, and even myself, have struggled with my relationship with food over time.
Sure.
Trying to see food as less of an obligation and more of something that we can truly spend time in, and really enjoy. So I was diagnosed with an eating disorder a couple semesters back rather. And that's kind of been a fundamental part of me wanting to improve my own relationship with food, and kind of not allowing other people to fall into that trap. Because I think that eating disorders, they're not talked about a lot in our culture, and they're not given enough. The people that suffer them rather aren't really given the respect and the honor that they deserve. And it's kind of likened just to be like, oh, someone doesn't like to eat. While, I love food, I love thinking about food, and I have an eating disorder. And I think that the more that we talk about food, the more that we integrate it into our school systems and our lives, and really take kind of appreciate the beauty of eating toast in the morning and all of the flavors, and different things that we can relate to around food. And that kind of also what propelled me to start working with Common Roots, which is a nonprofit in South Burlington, Vermont. And they do farm to school education. So I help write their curriculum, and help teach kids K through 5, but also teens, and even their prenatal groups that they have about food and nutrition, and how whenever we decide what to eat, we make a choice, not only for our physical bodies, but also for our minds and our souls.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. That's really, really inspiring. So you mentioned that you help like kind of organize a curriculum, and also you've got a food blog.
Yes,
right?
I do. I do run a food blog. I love sharing recipes. I think as a college student in general, we kind of had this weird limbo with food where it's like some people come into college and they know how to make scrambled eggs, and then some people
Sure.
come into college and just never, and they're just like, how do I use a toaster? And I think that anytime we can give each other pointers or tips, is really meaningful, and a great opportunity. So I'm currently the editorial director and president of our chapter of Spoon University. and we're a food publication platform. So we allow people to write articles, share their recipes, share pictures
Sure.
of them cooking, and really foster a love of food and community. And we also are looking to do some philanthropy this upcoming semester. So that's going to be
Oh, cool.
exciting.
Cool. So this being your passion, how has like your hardship around that like kind of like affected how strongly you feel about like making this what you want to do with your life?
I think it's definitely, I think it's really impacted me, like speaking vocationally, academically. I came into UVM as a environmental law student with the VLS 3+2 program, which
Sure.
allows students to go to Vermont law after a couple of years at UVM. And I just found that law was, torts was just so mind-numbingly boring,
Hmm.
and something that I didn't really feel like I was making an impact on other people. And after really kind of diving into nutrition and food, and learning more about it, and learning more about my health and my stance on the issue, I feel like I've been able to integrate my passion for politics and science, and history, kind of into my academic settings as far as food goes.
Okay, so it's really you view it as like a public service type of like mission, basically, that
Yeah,
you're willing to like get information out there and like you want to use that to impact possibly kids in like development, people that are like going through it, kind of stuff like that, basically.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that I see it as a service, and I think that that's kind of always been my mentality, is to leave my community better than where I found it.
Sure.
And I think because these are kinds of issues that aren't really talked a lot about in our community, that the more we bring awareness to them, the better off we'll be in the long run.
Hmm. I agree with you. Yeah. So was there like a turning point that really turned you onto this path? Because you mentioned that you came into school with a different path in mind. And so like I'm just wondering like where did you really turn and were like this is the direction I want to go? Like what made you want to do that?
I think I had just taken a couple classes I'm an environmental studies major, so a lot of my classes kind of surround themselves with food and issues of equity in the food system,
Okay.
whether I like that or not. Of course, I love it, but I think that I started taking more classes and learning about development, and just really wanting to. I saw the food systems minor was an option, and I was talking to my advisor one day, and I was like, "That seems kind of cool." And she was like, "Yeah, if it's something you want to go for, take a class in it and see how it goes." And I took Intro to Ecological Agriculture with Vic Izzo, and then I also took Food and Culture with Teresa Mares, and I was really turned on to all of the ways that food impacts every discipline of academic studies. And that's why the food systems program at UVM, I think, is so immersive, is because
Sure.
it connects almost every division on campus.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's definitely so like finding that after you get to school has like been a big part of like forming your interest. And I guess I'm just wondering like how does that being now your minor, um, how does that play into your long-term goals? Like where do you see this going? Do you see yourself continuing to write and publish or write and then publish? Or do you see yourself like going into like an education career, any business forming from this? Like what do you see long term?
Oh man. Well, I'd really like to own a restaurant someday. I think that's just one of
Okay.
my kind of general goals, or a food truck or something, some way to kind of bring food to the people. So that's kind of a side interest.
Hmm.
But I also took a journalism class when I was, I think, a first year student. And my professor, Josh Brown, he told me, he was like, "Oh, like you should fall in love with the story and not the way that you wrote it." And I think that's kind of govern my interest as far as food goes. And me, I feel like I'm also the person that doesn't want the same job for my whole life.
Sure.
And I think I definitely don't want to focus in a particular aspect, but I'd love to do policy research. And I've also spent a lot of my summers working with kids at my home summer camp. And I think that kids are kind of at this weird developmental stage where they're very impressionable. So the relationships that we have to kids, and how they see their world will form all of the things that they think about, and their reactions with society as they get older. So I think that anytime that we have the opportunity to impact kids, particularly through school lunch programs, through education programs, through immersive opportunities for them to get outside, is
Hmm.
such an important and such a whether we realize it or not, we play such a mentorship role in their lives that I'd like to do that as well. And maybe sprinkle in a little policy here and there, because
Okay,
I still do have a piece of my heart for law, but
gotcha. So you never like lost that side. That's good.
yeah.
Um, so being also into journalism and writing, you must have like a few favorite authors, some motivations. Like, who's really your motivations when you're like taking what you do, and like who's your motivation to keep going and like keep pushing?
I think that I have so many favorite authors over time. I think that recently I have been reading a lot of Michael Twitty's work, and I was first introduced to him as a writer in Food and Culture, and he's a Black author, and he basically works in these demonstrations on former like slave plantations in the South, and basically he talks about the untold history of Black culture in Southern food, and how there are so many issues of race, and there are so many issues of who can produce food, and who is entitled to the recipes and the culture that food produces. And I think that he really speaks in a way that he's very empowering. And he's also a person, I feel like, that's not afraid to speak up for what he feels is right. So I think that anyone that has that personal conviction is definitely someone that I look up to. As far as authors go, I also really like Julie Guthman, who's a author out of California, and she wrote a book called Weighing In, which discusses the beyond beyond physical aspects of obesity in American culture, and typically how we as Americans regard people that have issues around body image, as far as obesity and high BMI, as losing control of their life, or just not having that active role, or just not wanting to be healthy. But I feel like she's able to provide a criticism of that, and she says, you know, it's the food system, it's the culture, it's the food environment, it's where we're sending our kids to school, it's that they see the ads for Coca-Cola whenever they walk to school in the morning,
Okay.
and it's those things that impact their food choice. So it's not that easy to just say it's an individual problem, especially when we have so many Americans dying every year of similar diet related disease.
That seems kind of like people are not making food choices particularly, they're making foods being pushed on them in a way.
Yeah,
Eh, okay. And so like,
definitely. Yeah, I liken it to like food agency. So
okay,
I ask myself a lot about how much control I actually have over my own food choices when it's so based in economics, and what you can afford and what you have physical access to.
sure. And so like financial like financial like relevancy in an economy is like a huge part of like, well, the quality of food you can get, and like the freshness of your ingredients, and even if you can like make something like from home, or you have to buy like the microwavable dinner or something like that, it's all like finance is ingrained in that in a way. And so like you not having like your finances set up can like really affect you and your diet,
Yeah,
every.
definitely.
So I guess I'm just wondering, in dealing with um you know eating disorders and stuff like that, how how are you able to shift your mindset? Like, how are you able to get away from like hating thinking about what you're going to eat, and moving to, I can't wait to like try this new recipe, or I can't wait to like eat this cool new dish I found.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of kind of divorcing the issues associated with eating disorders, and them between the between them and the food itself, because I think that one of the common misconceptions that comes up around eating disorders is people thinking that it's just the food itself.
Right.
And I think it's a lot bigger issue. It's issues with, um, finding personal gratification. It's, issues of finding safety and comfort and
Hmm.
a way to get away from anxiety and depression and anything else that may be concerning you in the surrounding world. And I think that food provides a really creative pathway for us to both channel those emotions in a way that's productive and also in a way that could potentially endanger our lives.
Hmm.
And I think that the severity of eating disorders, the statistics are certainly alarming, but I think that we really need to focus on the issues when it comes to them, that are improving the relationship that people have with their own self confidence and self worth, and creating environments where people can learn how food can be a positive experience rather than a negative one.
Okay. Okay. Um, so if you had to recommend to people like um, two specific books, if they were like curious about food health or curious about like culinary arts, two specific books, or alternatively two specific like YouTube channels that you like.
Ooh, I've always loved cooking shows. I think that's the one thing that
Okay.
whenever I'm home, I always watch. I
Anything
just
notable?
like, yeah, I think that there's so much out there. As far as books, I think Michael Twitty's The Cooking Gene came out not too long ago. So you can read that one. Another one of my favorites, Weighing In by Julie Guffman, and there's also a book called Free for All by Jeanette Poppendick, who is a very prolific school food writer. And I think a lot of people are going to probably ask me after listening to this, like, why didn't you say Michael Pollan and Mark Bittman and all of the well-known food authors? And I think a lot of you have to look into too how food journalism is often dominated by white male people of power, and less minority voices and less voices of women. And that's something that we need to change in both the food journalism world and the writing and journalism world as it is.
Yeah, do you see that as like something that motivates you to like keep doing it and like something that drives you?
Definitely, definitely. I think that everyone has their own story to tell. And I think that I'm able to kind of also like step back and kind of think of my own privilege as being like a relatively financially stable middle class college student, and being really grateful for all of the opportunities that I've had to write and publish, and immerse myself in something that people would probably say is like yuppie Vermonter culture. And it's such a great opportunity, but I think we need to really think that, who's able to write about and who's able to engage in discourse around these kinds of issues.
Okay. So you like open it up more and like
Yeah,
everyone can weigh in.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, if you had a 10-year plan, what would your marker 3 be? What would your marker 5 be? And what would your marker 10 look like?
Oh, wow, what a great question. I think that in 3 years, so I'm planning on graduating in December. Filled out my class selection, so hopefully that goes smoothly. And I think I would really like to see myself in the classroom. I think working in some kind of or getting my graduate degree. The food systems program at UVM is so strong, and that kind of gives people a general background in anything related to food systems. So I'd really like to do that. As far as 5 years from now, so that puts me in 2025, I'll be 25 years old. I think that I'd really like to also work in kind of a work in not necessarily an internship capacity, but um, start to pave my way with working with smaller organizations and gaining the skill set within my respective realm, because especially if a food journalism is something that I want to pursue vocationally, you don't just get into the New York Times on your first day.
Right. Yeah.
And that it's really important to have those skills and make those connections. So working with as many authors as I can, and also kind of experiencing how that realm works in the vocational sense. And then 10 years from now, one of my goals in life is to have a homestead and grow my own food. And that sounds very, again, yuppie Vermonter of me. But I think that anytime that we have the capacity to really go back to our roots, grow our own food, and less, and diverse ourselves less from the food that we eat, is an opportunity to really engage and just find something super meaningful. So I'd like to have a homestead. I'll probably be working by then. But I mean, I'm willing to kind of move around. I don't want to live the same life that I live in 3 years and in 5 years and in 10 years.
Right. So it's going to be dynamic, and you're going to be changing and building this like kind of like your ideals out as you go along, right? You're going to like have a little your foot in the water as you go, and it's going to influence your direction. So like you're going to start with education and continuing, and then you're going to get your feet wet with like the community stuff and like develop as a writer in the local community, and then kind of just like a 10-year personal fulfillment, getting like that homestead, getting like that one thing that you really want to achieve, and that's really inspiring. Just that you have that planned out already, and like a lot of people are like so uncertain with what they want to like do with your life, right, with their lives right now. And I'm just wondering like how you came to that conclusion. Like how what is your process for planning out like what you like? Is it just based on what interests you, and then you do some like daydreaming and stuff, or do you write your goals out? Do you like give yourself timelines? Like what does your goal like planning look like?
Yeah, well, I definitely think I personally love my planner. It's something that I'm really addicted to using, and I think that it gives us um, a good way to kind of plan everything out. But I think I found the most important question that I ask myself on whether it be like a daily or a monthly basis, or is, why am I doing this? What significance does this have? Who does this benefit? How does this benefit me in the long run?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of liken that to also like exercising. Like sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I really don't like running. Like today, I really just don't want to go outside, like looking a little gross. But I tell myself like the only person you're playing in the long run is yourself. Like the
Okay.
only person
Yeah.
who's suffering here is you. So it might be, it's great to have those kinds of, oh, I need to be productive, I need to get everything done, I need to have this strategic plan for the rest of my life. But it's also taking those times and knowing that decompressing and stepping back and reflecting will help you in the long run as well.
Perfect. And one last question that I want to ask you is,
Of course.
what are your 3 top favorite dishes right now?
Oh, my 3 top favorite dishes. Oh my God. I think, well, I love to start every morning. I find so much simplicity in peanut butter. And I think that that's probably the one food that like, I couldn't imagine what I would do if I was allergic to peanut butter, because I eat so much of it. And I just think it's like this happy, great food. So I love peanut butter on any kind of like granary toast, with banana, a little bit of agave. I am a vegan, so I love using that kind of technique and that kind of ethical approach.
Got you. And
But
like
peanut butter,
you have to get really creative there too.
you do, because you also have to read the labels of things,
Mm-hmm.
because eggs, milk, and just they sneak their way into everything, and it sucks sometimes. But I think I also really love eggplant parm, and that's one food that I remember my mom making as a kid. And it's so hard to find a cheese and to make a cheese that melts, or has that same consistency, so that if you
Sure.
ever serve it at a dinner, someone won't look at it and just be like, oh, that's definitely not cheese. So I do love making my own eggplant parm, and it's deliciously cozy. And then for lunch today, I also had potato leek soup, which is a food that my mom used to make when I was a kid. And I hated because I thought that leeks and onions were like the most disgusting vegetables on the planet. And as I've grown older, I've kind of learned to appreciate them and their simplicity. So I love a good potato leek soup as well.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This has been Sarah Klimsz on Instagram,
Yep.
SARAKLIMZZ. And we can also find you on Spoon University, correct?
Yep. We have a page. We also have a Facebook page and an Instagram. On if you'd like to follow us, you can see all of our articles that we've posted, not just from me, but also other people sharing recipes and all of their culinary pursuits.
Perfect. All right. So if you guys have an interest in the culinary arts, culinary health, I definitely recommend checking Sarah out. Also check out The Art of Eating. It's a good magazine that my friend's parents run, and it's really just about culinary arts. Sarah's out here writing like food health stuff, culinary stuff. Like I definitely recommend you guys check it out. Thank you so much for meeting with me, and have a good rest of your day.
Awesome.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
All right. Welcome back, guys. We got another guest for you here today. It's Yasha. She's here to describe her background in marketing and her hustles that she has kept coming up with. She's got great ideas, a great driven person, and she's just here to like talk a little bit about her background. All right, Yash, you want to give a quick intro into your background as a marketing student and just a queen hustler in general?
Yeah, so my background is I'm from Vermont. I'm born and raised in the hills here. Grew up skiing in the Mad River Valley. From there, I got an opportunity when I was a sophomore in high school to go abroad to Slovakia. I was like, fuck high school. I hope it's okay to swear on the podcast.
Sure.
I was like, I'm out of here. I'm going. So I went to Slovakia, fell in love with traveling. Met a bunch of business leaders through Rotary, which is the program I went through.
Sure.
All these like really badass entrepreneurs, basically. Came back my junior year, worked through, went to public high school, realized I was just like, I thought it was too cool for everybody, and I just didn't fit in. And I got another opportunity. Doors just kind of kept opening in weird ways to go to college early. So I packed my bags basically of public high school, like washed my hands of it, and went straight to Norwich University, which is in the center of Vermont. So traditionally a military college. From there, I was like, what the heck am I going to study? Recalled back all my great experiences working at ski resorts, and my mom's in business and is kind of an entrepreneur herself. And I was like, wow, I really like this business thing. Like I'm pretty interested in understanding how things go. So I kind of went there for a year, realized I loved marketing, I loved business, but I didn't like the school. Thought I was going to go to a strictly business school. Was like, all right, this is it. I'm going to study finance and math and economics. And I'm going to, make a bunch of money on Wall Street. But I realized that my draw to Vermont was much stronger than I anticipated. And I found myself, which I thought I never would thought of doing. I found myself, sending the deposit in to go to UVM. And from there, I kind of just let doorways open and I just kept walking through them. So that's my background, a little bit about me. And
Perfect. Yeah, just taking advantage of opportunities wherever they're, presented.
Yeah, exactly.
So got into college early,
Yeah,
got some shit under your belt.
Yeah, so I was 14 when I went abroad to Slovakia. Crazy, wow. Right? Turned 15 when I got there, basically, and lived in a foreign country, essentially by myself at 15. And then from there, I went to college at 16, or like started my classes at 16, turned 17. Again, was basically a 17-year-old freshman with all these peers, and I was like, let's go, I'm ready. And looking back at it now, I'm like, wow, I would never hang out with a 17-year-old, but people did.
People did. That's funny. All right, so you mentioned that you thought you were going to go into like finance, like Wall Street was the goal, but like you've shifted out of that mindset. And so how'd you land in marketing, and where do you think you're going to go with it? Like what's the long term look like?
So the question of how did I land in marketing? One, I'm a salesperson, 100%. I would work at weddings, worked at events growing up in catering. I sold retail at Sugar Bush Resort for a couple of years. I loved talking to people. I could literally talk to a brick wall for 4 hours. Doesn't even matter, as you may know. So then I shifted from this financial side when I realized that like personality wise, I wouldn't be able to talk and experience and like do these like high adrenaline things that I love to do.
Sure.
And that's when another opportunity kind of presented itself. So I was at UVM basically essentially a sophomore. And in December, more like November, I got a notification on a Facebook group that I was a part of saying, hey, Red Bull's got this really cool opportunity. They're looking for someone to do student marketing. It was like really, really quick. And it was like, if you're interested, email this person. And I quickly emailed the person and I said, hey, I saw this position online. I think I'm your girl. And that was it. And from there, I got an interview. And then from there, I kind of dove into experiential marketing with Red Bull for about a year and a half. And I fell in love with sports marketing and outdoor action sports, which is where I'm really wanting to go.
All right, cool. So you're trying to like involve like I'm guessing skiing and like stuff like that in your long-term plan as well.
Yeah. I'm lifestyle focused as I could like figure out by the time I went from Norwich to the University of Vermont. I was like, okay, lifestyle is what I want. Like I want to be close to the mountains. I want to be skiing. I want to be enjoying like the community that I'm in. I'm from a place that's really heavy on community,
Sure.
especially the outdoor industry. And I was like, this is the industry I want to be in. I love every one of the reps. I love going to the events. I love doing demo days. Like all that kind of stuff is like my forte. Like working 60-hour work weeks, or like 100-hour work weeks to like get that, adrenaline of like that event or that thing that everyone is like stoked on for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Like I'm into it.
So does it even feel like work for you if you really enjoy like being part of the event, being like in it?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Like so when I was working at Red Bull, my friends would be like, why are you doing this? Like, you're stressed out. It's like, I'm stressed out because I care. And like, it took me a really long time to like recognize that like, there's a difference between like stress and passion. And like, if you are passionate about something, like you will give everything into it. Like,
Yeah.
it will not, like, you won't sleep until it's perfect. And so it was really hard, like learning that balance.
How do you go about like getting these connections? Because I know you've been connected to like resorts, you've been connected to Red Bull now. Like there's always just big brands that you keep like getting a hold of and like keep getting some like brand rep like deals through. So like I'm just wondering like how you're establishing like these connections the way you do.
Yeah. So I was always told from a young age, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's true. It's really true. And if you can hold yourself to a high standard and you can talk with these, take a seat at the table with the adults and be able to like hold true in the conversation, it's really worth it. So again, growing up in the ski industry, basically, I always had connections to CMOs of like head skis, Olympians. I always had connections with these people who were, pioneers in their industry, in their field. So it kind of came naturally to me. And like nowadays everyone's like, I'm not shocked you're following in your mom's footsteps. And like a little bit, but not really. Like I'm definitely using my mom's connections and like people I grew up with or like I was surrounded with, or I grew up skiing with their kids. Like now I'm hitting them up and saying, hey, how did you get there? And like, how can I do it? But it's also not being afraid to like send a LinkedIn message or just like send an email, like a cold outreach, and just be like, hey, I'm your girl. Like I like read the job description. Like I'm so into this. Like, and
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like again, like, a good parallel between skiing and marketing and business is like, you have to be a risk taker. Like you have to be able to like put yourself on the edge of a cliff and like say, am I going to go off it or am I going to freak out and not ever try? Because here's the thing, you can either go off the cliff and you can land, you can go off and explode. And that's totally fine because you just put your skis back on and you keep going, or you just like walk away and let the anxiety of like never doing it like get you down. And that was a great analogy. And
we're getting whole ass analogies out here. That was really good.
That was good.
But yeah, also like there's a lot of people that their parents are like pretty successful and like their kids just don't amount to much. And I feel like it's a lot a lot in part just because they don't feel like they have to, and they don't feel like they have to utilize the connections that are available to them, right? And if you
Yeah.
have the connections, it's in your best interest to use what you have, right? Use
Oh
whatever
yeah.
you have available to you. And
Yeah.
that's what you're
And
doing.
I'm also the type of person like if someone's like or like my friend's boyfriend just asked me the other day, he's like, I want to make snow pants, like I want to learn all this stuff. And I was like, he's like, can you connect me with this person? I'm like, yes. And I'll actually connect you with X, Y, and Z who know even more than the person that you thought you wanted to be connected to. And so you can even like I think there's nothing better than being able to like help people fulfill their dreams. Like, yeah, my mom was really successful in her field, but at the same time, like she was in apparel design, nothing in marketing. So it was like I had to like build my own connections on that aspect through channels of like reps who I like grew up going to sales meetings with. My brother, luckily, my brother is like a semi-professional skier, so I learned a lot from him and his peers and made connections through like Instagram. Like that's a platform you can use to like market yourself and like brands. So like you might
Right.
as well use it.
Instagram's a huge marketing opportunity, and LinkedIn is for professionals. Like, it's probably as best as it gets, and it's super slept on right now. And I wish a lot more people utilized it.
Right
Yeah,
now,
you've had some luck, right?
yeah, so right now, sorry, the if it keeps glitching a little bit,
You're fine.
what I believe you said was you were asking about LinkedIn. Right now, especially with COVID-19, I'm a senior, and unfortunately, I previously thought, all right, I'm set. I'm like I've been in the marketing industry for a while. I have a professional career right now, even though it's a temporary contract. It ends in May. I was like, I'm golden, you know. But what
Mhm.
I've learned is like you can never be too sure, and you can never keep reaching out and expanding your network enough. So what I did was I used my network and I said, hey, I really admire your job. Or like, hey, whatever your name is, like, I hope all is well. I'm a graduating senior and I'm really interested on how you went from University of Vermont to Seattle working for Amazon. Or I'm really interested to have how you went from an internship here to what you're doing now. Do you have any time to talk? And people are like, yes, like milk the student thing. I can't say it enough. Like most people have this like lifeline of like, I'm a student and everyone's like, I want to help you. It's like,
Right.
please do, thank
Okay.
you.
So what you're saying is like executives and business owners and stuff are you feel like they're in a different world, or most people would think they're in a different world, right? And they wouldn't respond to a question that you ask them. But you'd be surprised, like if you
Mhm.
actually reach out to these people, like how often
Yeah,
you're actually going to get a response. Maybe not on anything like Instagram or anything, because that's just like
yeah.
general public, but like platforms like LinkedIn, they're
Hmm.
super like likely to like answer you back and like give you the guidance
Yeah.
that you need.
And like what's so funny is originally I had like we can go talk about LinkedIn, but like and I think of myself as like kind of like a LinkedIn connoisseur. I originally had a really professional LinkedIn, you know, like the typical blue background cover photo, one picture of myself, like really super professional, you know, like my bio said student. And then as I was looking at like the chief marketing officer of Red Bull, the chief financial officer of Red Bull, of like, you know, CMOs of North Face, all these people from like different outerwear companies for the industry that I wanted to go in, they were
Mhm.
all showcasing their lives, you know, they were wearing their Patagonia puffies and they were like showcasing the brands that they were working for. And I was like, you know what? I want to do that too. So I changed my LinkedIn to reflect who I am as a business person, but who I am as a person. And I got way more responses.
Right. Yeah. It's especially among like business students, it's like they go as hard as they can to like button themselves up and make them look like something that like they think companies would want. But really if you're just like open with yourself and you use it kind of like an extension of like your social media platform, not necessarily you're definitely posting different content. Like 100% you're posting different content, but like it's still showing aspects of your life, and
How
that's really important. It makes you
yeah,
look like an actual person.
yeah, like I competitively ski and I follow the Freeride World Tour and I'm down to always like repost something cool or make a comment on it and be like, this professional athlete just kicked ass and I'm so stoked on it because like one of my career goals is like to be an athlete manager. Like being connected with the athletes is number one for that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if that's like kind of what you want to go into as well as like some of this marketing stuff, doing like do you see yourself like working for like a CMO of a resort or something like that, or do you see yourself like opening like a private marketing firm that like you have different like goals like that you could have like athlete representation and you could also have like resort marketing and stuff like that and product marketing and stuff like that. So what's
Yeah.
kind of like the long-term position you see yourself in?
I've been joking about it for years. That I want to be a CMO by 35. I'm 20. I'm
Hmm.
graduating college. I think I could do it in 15 years.
I mean,
Um,
the way you're going so far, I mean, it seems like it's a reasonable goal.
yeah, and I think here's the biggest thing for me is like, again, lifestyles are driven. So it's like I want to work in the outdoor industry specifically. Like I love it right now. I'm 20 years old and I can handle like these crazy work weeks where I do events, and I love that. Eventually, when I want to have a family, I might not be able to do that. But like as my life, I think it's like having like moving goals, like moving target goals, and being able to like reevaluate every couple months and being like, what does my life look like? And like, does that work out?
Sure. So these moving goals, they're like just super dynamic. Like how, so you're planning long term and then you're also having short term goals.
Yeah.
What's your like process of like creating these goals? Like how do you formulate them? Like what are they based off of? Are they based off of like your interests only? Are your short term goals based off your long term goals? Like what's the building process look like?
So I think the long-term goal is like financial security and like lifestyle again, but lifestyle comes from like this lifestyle of an active like individual. Like skiing is an expensive hobby, mountain biking is an expensive hobby, and living in mountain towns is really expensive. So
Yeah.
obviously I need to be able to have a job that can sustain all three of those things. So it's like, yeah, my short-term goal is being able to like go skiing a bunch and like have fun, but it's also like doing it in a way that like I can still like keep my finances in check, which is something that I've been like working for since I was like 12. I've always been like a saver. I have this crazy financial system that like helps me like save money. Like I was always told, you want to have $15,000 in the bank before you graduate college. I'm at that point. Like
That's good.
it's just like really short-term goals for a long-term one is how I do everything in life.
So your short term builds into your long term because like you see the long term and you're just like these are the short term goals that I need to hit so that
Mm-hmm.
it secures my like long term and like make sure that it's still achievable 5
Yeah.
years down the line,
Yeah.
because you have 15 years until your ultimate goal of like being a CMO, right? And then you'd also want to be like financially stable at that point. And I'm sure that like just because that you're doing like these 3 month, 12-month, 3 year goals and stuff, and you're like making easy checkpoints for yourself to like hit, it's not when you get to that long term goal, it's not like, oh shit, I'm shooting for the stars right now. It's like I've
Oh,
just
yeah.
been climbing a ladder this whole time, you
Yeah,
know?
but the ladder is tricky, and some rings are longer than others, and like
Oh, for
that's
sure.
something I've learned recently is like, I didn't think like the current marketing agency I work at, so I work at Fuse Marketing right now in Winooski, and I started as an intern, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna take this unpaid internship. I literally went vegetarian because I had no money, like I was broke. I was like, I am not dipping into my savings. I'm not dipping into my savings. I lived like
Hmm.
bare minimum for like 3 months. And then they were like, hey, you work really hard. Do you want a full-time role? And I was like, me? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, hell yeah, I do. And then I just like continued to bust ass to like keep climbing this ladder. But it's like at the same time, like I could have gone out and I could have taken some paid job working as a waitress somewhere, and I wouldn't have had the growth that I would have gotten from that internship. And like
Yeah.
sometimes it's like being able to sacrifice those things, or like living really in a really rough spot for 3 months to be able to like spend the next six really happy.
Hmm. And so it's all about like that short term sacrifice, and like you were a little scared there for a little bit, but it ended up paying off. And as long as you show that you've got the drive, you've got the hustle, people like are aware of that,
Oh
especially
yeah.
like the people that you consider your mentors and that are like teaching you. And
Yeah.
it's really important to have these people that are teaching you. You need to learn from someone else. You're really lucky that you have like one, your mom that's also in the industry, and then you've also got these people that you're interning for that are
Yeah.
teaching you like things that they know,
Yeah.
and they've seen your hustle, and they respect it and they offer you jobs because of it. And I just think that's like going to go a long way, for you in the future, just because like you're building huge connections with these people that are like your mentors
Mhm.
and like that you're learning everything from. Um, so when did your love of skiing actually start though? Like, because it was when you were a kid, or did you like grow up near a mountain and just like go with your parents, or like who sparked that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I live, so to put it in geography perspective, I live in the Mad River Valley. So we've got Sugarbush, Mount Ellen, Lincoln Peak. So Sugarbush, Mount Ellen, Lincoln Peak are one conglomerate, two
Yeah.
mountains. Then we have Mad River Glen. I live 5 minutes from Mad River Glen, 5 minutes from Mount Ellen. I grew up like, yeah, my mom was a snowboarder, so I didn't go to Mud River. I went to Sugarbush. I grew up in ski camps or like weekend ski programs, and I didn't realize that this was not a normal thing until I was like 10. Like I thought everybody just went and skied on the weekends. Like it baffled me that people spent their weekends otherwise.
So it's really just like location because of like where you were like nestled in the hills.
Yeah,
You were
just like
able to like
yeah. Well, that wasn't like where I began to love it though. So that's when I like how I got introduced to it, and I just it
okay.
was something I did like, but it's at the same time it was like something I did that my parents wanted me to do. But my love for it actually really, really developed when I went abroad and I couldn't do it because I lived in the south of
Oh, okay.
Slovakia. So I
Sure.
was only able to go skiing for like 3 weeks, like in total. Like I went a couple weekends and then for a week long and then for a week long. And that was crazy to me because I had never ever had a weekend in a winter that I didn't go skiing. So it was like when you really don't have something is when you really fall in love with it.
It's great. It's inspiration because you don't know what you have until it's,
Like,
you can't use it, you can't access it.
yeah, and that's exactly like in most people from most of the in Europe from Vermont as well. Like most kids from Vermont
Yeah.
are like, I want to get the fuck out of here. Here's the thing: we've have such a great community and so many great opportunities here that aren't taken advantage of. And because they're not taken advantage of, like companies don't want to come and like invest in Burlington and invest in like establishing roots here if there's no like young entrepreneurial or young like base of workers to be able to like build that company up. Like IBM was so successful here in the late 90s, but afterwards and after everybody left, like it's hard. We only have a couple big companies that are like willing to take a shot on young students from St. Mike's, Champlain, and UVM.
Right. Do you think that's like a large part of just like people moving out back home and like no one, it's not really a retention of these like educated students that are trying to like start something. They'd rather go back home and start something. Like what are we missing as like the draw for Burlington, do you think?
I think we're missing like, yeah, we've got great like craft breweries, but I think we're missing like our niche. Like we need to like establish ourselves as like the East Coast Bay Area, like or like the East Coast this. Like I think it's important that like companies aren't just established in Boston, but they try Burlington, which has so much like it's so close to Montreal and to international markets and that kind of aspect. But it's also willing for like I don't want to say a sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice of like the talent in Vermont to be able to like say, hey, I want to stay here. Like most of us like go to UVM and then we move right out, and it's like we have an aging population. Like if we can rebuild our population of youth, it'll be you know it'll be more promising for companies to like be able to invest here.
Sure. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Um, Local investment is a huge part of like why, well, local retention first is like a huge part of just like economic like growth, just
Mm-hmm.
because like if you can keep your young people and like they go into your industry or they start like entrepreneurial ventures, like it's really healthy for like the growth of like smaller cities like this.
Yeah.
um I do want to talk about, speaking of like being entrepreneurial, what are some of like your current like projects or your current like side hustles you're working on? Because I know you've got like this job with Fuse, and I'm just wondering if like you've got anything else in the works. Are you really excited for something? What are you working on?
So currently, because of COVID, there's like not really that much. But
Yeah.
you asked like a month ago. So a month ago, I was a senior working my butt off for Rocky Lee DeWitt doing her global capstone class, which is very challenging. But I was also a freestyle athlete, so I was competing every weekend. Sometimes for a week long. We were supposed to be out in Copper for nationals actually right now. Um, and I was also a ski coach on the weekends because I love the kids and I love the community and the aspect. I didn't need the money. I literally like got paid as much as I spent in gas getting here. Um, but it was about the kids, and it was about like retaining talent and telling these young girls like, you're impressive. Like, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to say you're scared. And like something that I do, like that I didn't do as a kid, was admit that I was scared. And I've started
Sure.
doing that for like sports and for life, is like, I'm nervous and here's why, and here's how I'm working to get over it. But I want to let you know that I have anxiety about this. And that way, like, someone else can say, oh my God, I am too. Like, I'm really nervous about this. And then we work together to get over this hurdle, rather than just have like mental barriers like breaking you down. And so like I had, a job. Basically, I worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday was my only off day to train for free skiing for myself. Saturday I worked, Sunday I competed, and then do it all over again. And it was crazy.
And Saturday you were working at the mountain?
Yeah.
Like, okay. So your hustles aren't necessarily for the money, right? But
No.
they are
No.
to improve like your lifestyle and keep you immersed in the community and keep you connected with these like young skiers and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So you're still like hustling for something,
Yeah.
even though that's not like, it's not like with financial goals.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
No,
You're
exactly.
still secure and like you still figured that out, right? And
Yeah.
that's what your main job is for. But you've still like, you're doing extra work on the weekends because you want to stay involved, you know? And I
Or
find
night,
that's really
like
cool.
stuff like
That's like a
that.
different like it's just a different take on what people would call a hustler,
Yeah.
you know? Because you're hustling for something else that people
Yeah.
wouldn't normally.
I'm hustling for myself. It's like I'm just trying to keep building my connections, and like, like I would get calls from parents in the valley, and they'd say, "Hey, can you watch my house for a week?" And I'd be like, "Okay, but I'm also doing X, Y, and Z, and X, and Q." And they're like, "That's cool. Can you still house sit too?" So then I'd be driving to and from the valley to Burlington again. Like, I would just be like keeping my connections with these people, and like helping other people out is like something I really like doing. And like, yeah, I may go into a nonprofit sector because I like that, but there's no money there, so it's
Right.
like it's a hustle, so you can either make change, or you can feel better for yourself. And feeling better, it's like I feel like the hustle is for this like this mental stimulus, or like this emotional connection. And some people, that's money, and that's okay. Like, the more money you have, the happier you are. That's fine. For me, it's like the more people I help, and the more people I see smiling because of what I've done, or like because of like how I've helped people, like that's what does it for me.
Sure. Yeah. And I guess if you're like so community driven, like and you want to go into like stay in the Vermont community and like build something here, what long-term effects are you trying to have on the community? Like, how are you trying to identify yourself as like that person that has like established a connection within like these smaller Vermont towns and like really is like a spokesperson for them and really helping out the local communities here? Like, how do you plan to do that in the long term?
So I think the hard part is like, again, in order for me to like get exposure and get experience in the fields that I want, I have to leave Vermont. And that's something that like is hard, but it's like I'm excited for that opportunity, because like
Sure.
as you leave Vermont, you realize again the community we have here, and like the networks that you've built. And so I think long term it's going to take, and like I've thought of this all the time, like when I was a kid there was triathlons, like every summer there was like the Sugar Bush triathlon, there was the kids fun runs, and like all this like active stuff that like isn't happening anymore. And like that's something that's like really small that you can like implement in tiny towns, or in like any area, that like
Sure.
again you start, that's a small like that's again, and it's in marketing events, so it's small, it's action sports, it's doing something, and it involves kids, which I love hanging out with kids. They're so fun, they idolize me, which is the best part. Nothing strokes your ego like adults.
That's true.
Seriously. Like,
So
it's just like,
wherever you end up going, you're just planning to help kids, help the community. Wherever you
yeah,
end up going.
yeah,
Bring back these
basically.
programs that are like necessarily to like help kids grow and help kids discover like what their enjoyments are, like what their
Yeah, what
passions
their
are.
passions are. Or like maybe they're not passionate about running. I wasn't. I hated running. I did Girls in the Run, and I only did it for the bracelets. And that's okay, because you know what? I had all the bracelets, and that was sick. And I was like flexing on my bracelets. But some people were some people were into it because they loved running, and that's okay. Like, you can be involved in something because you like a single aspect of it, and that's okay. But the only part I think is challenging is like and then you get a lot of critique about marketing is it's fake. It's fake. It's fake. Marketing isn't fake. It's perception. And it depends on the type of perception you want people to have. So it's kind of like you're dancing a fine line here, but you don't have to dance the wrong one.
Right. So while you may be altering a perspective, you could be altering perspective in a positive way.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. So got like 2 more questions for you.
Yeah.
Who in like marketing right now or in the sports entertainment like world, who are your biggest in like inspirations right now currently?
There is a free skier, Angel Collinson.
Okay.
She's amazing, and she basically is. It's funny because she's very like crystal loving, does a lot of yoga. Like I love being active, but I'm not like a huge yogi, and that's like a community that I'm not a part of yet. Maybe at some point I will like dive into that. But she really inspires me because she is so honest about like skiing and about injuries and about like challenges and like is so public about it on Instagram. And like I think more people need to be like public about what's going on. And like companies that inspire me. Obviously Patagonia is one of them. Like they are one to say like this is wrong, we're gonna fix it. Like we're gonna roll up our sleeves and we're gonna fix it. Other marketers, I mean honestly like the partners at Fuse that I've been working, like this company is insane. Like the way that a small Vermont agency can go about making large scale events such as the Dew Tour is insane because you like you feel like they're so disconnected. You're like the Dew Tour thing, like it's so far away, but it's so much closer than it like it's like I work with these like 5 people who put it on, and that's insane. So
that's awesome.
I'm inspired by everybody. Like
perfect. It's a lot of good inspiration there. And my last question, do you have like 2 books or YouTube channels that you would recommend to like those people that want to get into marketing, that want to get into sports entertainment, sports marketing, any sort of thing like that? 2 books or 2 YouTube channels or one of each or whatever.
I'm gonna be frank, and I really should read more. But
YouTube channels. So who should they look into? What are the people that you recommend?
Number 1, David Dobrik. Obviously, he's
huge.
He's huge. He cornered the market with vlogs. Genius. 4 minutes and 20 seconds only. Let's go. Like knowing your customers and knowing what you want, like you're gonna get it. And like basically, anyway, David Dobrik's amazing. Like I think I love his YouTube channel. I love the way he does marketing. I think it's so cool how like transparent he is, how much he gives back to people, and just like the content he puts out on all of his platforms. The second thing is not a YouTube channel and it's not a book, but it's Adweek, and it's just being up to date on like marketing websites and like what's going on. Like what is something cool that people did? Like the Super Bowl happened. Who's did the best for like commercials, who's flopped, and like write down notes of why you liked it, why you didn't. And like when you're going into a pitch or you're going into like making something, you can say, oh, I really liked this and I have this inspiration. Like I love Pinterest boards, like because I love getting inspired by other people's things, because it's not copying other people, it's saying, hey, you did this great thing, and art's like this too. You did this awesome thing, I'm gonna take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and I'll make my own thing. And then someone's gonna see my thing, they'll be like, that's sick, I'm gonna take some of that. And it's like, you do you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. It's been like a huge inspiration because you've got like a lot of cool experience and you've got a lot of like good background and good connections, and like you know where you're going. So it's like really inspiring to see that. So thank you so much.
If anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, they're more than welcome to. And like I'd love to introduce people to find their passion.
That's true. So it's Yasha Herlihy. It's JASCHAHERLIHY.
Yeah.
And that together is also her Instagram handle if you'd like to follow her there.
There you go.
All right. Perfect.
Plugs.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye. All right. How you doing, everybody? We're back once again with Tyler Newcomb. He's right now he's an EMT and he's got interest in like wilderness and remote medicines, and I brought Tyler on so he can tell you a little bit about his background and what he's doing right now / where he's going to go. And welcome, Tyler.
Thank you.
All right. So can I get you to talk about a little bit what inspired you to like go into like wilderness medicine, and like what inspired you to want to become an EMT right now?
Sure. So several years ago, when I was involved with the Boy Scouts and was spending a lot of time outdoors, I took a course, a wilderness medicine course, when I was about 16, and that really kind of sparked my interest for taking care of people during emergencies, whether it be medical or traumatic injuries, and especially prompted my interest in long-term care and improvising when it comes to medicine.
Sure.
After that, when I was 18, I took a course at UVM to become an EMT, and I also took a course to become a wilderness first responder. And the two of those blended together brought me to where I am now, my wilderness EMT certification. So I'm currently working full-time as an EMT, and I plan in the future to go to paramedic school, get a higher level of care, and then
Sure.
bring that higher level of care back into the wilderness setting, which is something that's kind of on the cutting edge right now in the United States, at least.
Yeah. Okay. So you're doing like a full-time EMT job while you're
Yeah.
in school. So
No, I'm no longer in school.
you're no longer in school. Okay. So
Right.
you decided to just go all in on this.
Right.
All right. So that's pretty cool. And so how like what I'm not like super familiar on this, but how, like
Mhm.
what is there in like in wilderness medicine or remote medicine? Like what is there to go into? Like I'm not like familiar with the field, so can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so wilderness medicine as a career is very, very limited in the US. Over in Europe, it's primarily doctor level teams that are doing all this. But in the US, it's a lot of volunteer based. It's a lot of kind of pulling from other services. So
Sure.
some states have a state police that manage it, some states have Fish and Wildlife. The National Park Service does a lot of it. So it's less of a career in the US and kind of more of a conglomerate of a bunch of different agencies that handle it.
They're like
But
government agencies that are
right,
okay.
right. So what sets wilderness medicine apart from kind of everything else is you have increased difficulties in accessing your patient, right? They might be in kind of a weird environment that you might have to get to by hiking or by helicopter or all
Sure.
kinds of different challenges getting in there. And then you have to extricate them from that area, which can be difficult again if they can't walk or if they're unconscious. You have a lot more to consider and think about than you do in an urban environment where you can carry them out of their house and then drive them on paved roads to the hospital.
Okay, so this is kind of like your introduction to that setting, because it's obviously a lot higher thinking when you're in like dire circumstances. You're stuck out in the middle of nowhere,
Right.
you know.
There's a lot
Okay.
more elements to consider that are going on.
And what draws you to that? Is it just being outside, or is it the higher level of thinking that you need to like have, or is it just like having a team that's like knows the area very well and like is really
I
in
think
tune
it's a
with it?
combination of all of that. I really enjoy my time outdoors, and I like to share that with other people and bring people that don't have the experience in the outdoors into that environment. But there is inherent risk involved, no matter what you're doing in the outdoors. And I've seen that firsthand. I've had some injuries and seen some people with injuries in the backcountry. And then there's also, like you said, the element of kind of the challenges of it and being able to think through all those different things that you have to consider, as well as kind of like that teamwork. If you can work together really well with a team, that's something that's really inspiring and really makes you want to go out and do that stuff.
Gotcha. And so one of the things I was wondering is like, what is it like being an EMT like right now? Like with this like pandemic that's going on.
Yeah.
There's like definitely certain dangers and like procedures that I'm sure like you guys have to go through that are like different than normal. And so like how does that work in the team setting? Like what before you guys go out, like do you have to like keep in mind?
So it's changed a lot over the past couple weeks, as has everything else. As far as preparing for a pandemic like this goes, we really didn't have the training or the preparation, the foresight, at least on the lower level for something like this. So we've had to adapt very, very quickly. We're using much higher increased levels of personal protective equipment on all calls, and treating most people as if they have it already, to protect ourselves and protect our patients from us spreading it to them. But it's definitely a different environment. There's a lot that we have to consider, and pretty soon our hospitals are going to be pretty overwhelmed, and we're already seeing some changes to protocol and how we operate and how hospitals operate. That's really unprecedented in the U.S.
Sure. And so going forward, do you think that's going to affect like long-term procedure? Like, or do you think that's going to blow over when the pandemic like blows over? Or like, how do you see this affecting us long-term? Well, in your field anyway.
I think and I hope that it will affect how we prepare for things. We have always in EMS trained for mass casualty incidents, your terrorist attacks, your natural disasters, stuff that is easier to see, that we've prepared for. And a pandemic like this is really something that we had never prepared for in the past to the extent that we should, because it's something that is harder to see and harder to prepare for. So hopefully in the future we'll be better equipped to deal with this. We'll take the lessons that we learned from what's happening right now and apply that both to day-to-day operations and infection control, and to operations during a heightened level of a pandemic or epidemic, similar to what we're seeing now.
All right. And do you think this is going to like hold you back at all in terms of your long-term goals? Because you mentioned you are planning to go take another class or two to get into that higher level of like medicine, and like try to like work towards being like a first responder in one of these like government agencies or something like that. And so what do you think is the effect on your personal like education and your personal development towards your own goals is like this effect?
Yeah, I think I'm fortunate to be in a career that's always going to be in demand. I'm never, going to be put in a position where I can't work, because it is an essential service and it's something that people rely on very heavily, especially in times like this. So I think I won't really have any negative effects long term as far as being able to be employed goes. Classes, on the other hand, really still kind of up in the air. Some places are going mostly online, but a lot of emergency medicine is very hands-on, and you need to train hands-on for that in order to become competent in it. So hopefully by the time this passes, we'll kind of be back to normal and be able to train in person in the way that is necessary to become a competent provider.
Sure. What does your like timeline for your goals look like? Because I know like you're trying to reach in like an ultimate goal, and you've got like small steps on the way. Like you're trying to like further your education and stuff like that. And you've already got like a great vehicle in place right now with your current job. And like, that's like direct exposure to your industry. What does your timeline look like for where do you want to be at your dream career? And like, what are the 3-year, 5-year, like what are your plans 3 years out from now, 5 years out from now, 8 years out from now, to like whenever you think you're going to be at your dream job?
So I'd like to be enrolled in starting a paramedic program by the end of this year. And that is typically a 2-year program, and that's an associate's degree program. The way that I would like to do it, it's not always associate's degree. So between 2 to 3 years from now, I hope to be working full-time as a paramedic, which is the highest level of pre-hospital care. And then after working as a paramedic for a couple years, you're then able to take another course as a certified flight paramedic or a critical care paramedic. Usually they go hand in hand. And at that point, I'd like to begin working in critical care and fixed wing and helicopter emergency medical transports. And then from there, I'd like to kind of take all that knowledge and experience into the wilderness environment, really kind of dive into existing agencies and bring that higher level of care to them and to the wilderness environment, and become a leading voice in the research of that and the way that we provide care in the wilderness.
All right, and being like one of those leading figures, like that's your goal.
Mm-hmm.
Being one of those leading figures, do you think we need to like move more towards like what the procedure is like abroad, like having like specific like teams in place instead of like delegating all of the resources to like the state police or like Fish and Game and stuff like that? Do you feel like there should be like more delegated to specific teams
I
that are
think
like
so.
trained?
In a lot of areas right now, even urban EMS is either privatized or a subset of fire-based service.
Sure.
And I believe that that urban emergency medicine should be separated out, and then the wilderness medicine should be kind of a team within that emergency services.
Okay, it's like kind of like a subsection.
A subset
that.
of emergency
Yeah.
medicine. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And there's legal reasons for that as well. You need to have oversight of a medical director who's a doctor. And so that would
Okay.
kind of provide that when you're associated with a emergency medical service.
Okay, so that's like good to like move into. That's like a good reason that we would have to move into that structure
Right.
in the future. And so like as you're trying to be that figurehead, like how are you like trying to go about making this change? Like, are you like trying to work with like state departments? Are you trying to work with federal government? Like, what is like the goal in that sense?
Yeah, right now I'm really trying to do a lot of education,
Right, it's personal
teaching,
building
and so
right now.
I'm doing
Down
a
the
lot of
road, though.
courses. Right. Down the road, yeah, I think it would be a matter of working with kind of state agencies to determine who that is delegated to. Like I said, in some places, the missing persons goes to state police, and the rescue goes to fire departments or whatever. And I think
Sure.
working with those agencies over time to build up that trust in emergency medical services and their ability to perform that job is kind of essential in eventually transitioning to EMS providing care in the wilderness.
Gotcha. So when you're like when you move into like the wilderness like field, like when you move into like say one of these like national parks or something like that, first of all,
Yeah.
do you have like your eye on anyone in particular? Do you like really resonate with like one specific part? Like, do you have a goal to be in a specific location, or just like what is your lifestyle? What are you planning to have your lifestyle look like once you reach that certain point?
I don't think I really have my heart set on a specific location. I'd love to work in a park that's very climbing oriented because that's what I enjoy doing. But I think kind of any wilderness environment would be really interesting and present its own challenges. And I think it would be very enjoyable and fulfilling to work in any of those places, any of those national parks.
Sure. Now, what would you tell anyone that's like trying to follow basically in your footsteps? Like if like say there's like high schoolers out there that are really into like hiking and climbing and they're looking to get into like this sort of thing because they also have like an interest in medicine. What are things that you've discovered in your path that like have helped you, and what are some like different resources that you recommend?
Yeah, hard work is very essential. Hard work, and I think even more essential than that is the willingness to learn and just knowing that you're never really, going to know everything. So having that open mind and being able to learn more and become a better provider is essential. And just because a path doesn't clearly exist to the goal that you want doesn't mean that you can't kind of make your own path and get there.
Trailblazers Association.
Yeah.
Getting out there. All right. Now, has any of your like family like impacted your views on like what your future should look like, or what are their views on what you're like trying to become? Like, what do you think they'd recommend for you? Like, versus are they like supportive, or are they trying to recommend a more traditional career? Like, what's that like?
Yeah, so it's definitely unconventional. EMS in general doesn't really pay well, so it's out there for sure. But my family's been very supportive of me and very helpful in getting me to where I am today. And they all kind of want to see me in a career that I enjoy. So I'm very fortunate that they're supportive and helping me with my goals to get to where I want to be.
Sure, perfect. All right. And so kind of like the last question that I have for you
Mhm.
is I'd like to hear from you like two specific books or two specific YouTube channels or two specific figureheads that you think really are like good to like get out to people that like are interested in what you do. Books,
Yeah.
YouTube channels, figureheads.
So I think the first would be Dr. Eric Weiss. He's really a prominent figure in wilderness medicine. He has several books, Guide to Wilderness and Travel Medicine. He has a book on marine medicine, and he's kind of a leading figure. I'd say he's probably one of the leading people in the U.S. as far as wilderness medicine goes. And then the other book that I would recommend, or the other group that I would recommend, is Wilderness Medical Society. They
Okay.
have a lot of really good resources, and they're kind of trailblazing in a lot of ways to work with agencies and train people and get those resources to people that need them.
Sure. Do you ever see yourself like publishing like a book like that or like something based on like your experience down the line?
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. It's not something right now that I'm looking at, but I do think that, with my experience in teaching and my joy for that, I think it's definitely a possibility down the line.
Sure. Perfect. All right. So, do you have any like closing remarks, anything you want to like say to people about just having work ethic, goal setting, really about passion in general, like trying to get where you're trying to go?
Yeah, I think my biggest thing is, like I said, just stay flexible, stay open to new opportunities, new learning opportunities. Never get complacent in what you're doing. Always be willing
Sure.
to learn from people and better yourself.
Yeah,
And
mentors are super important and
yeah,
like
yeah,
get
exactly.
information wherever you can, right?
Yep.
All right. So everybody, that was Tyler Newcomb. You can find him on Instagram at wilderness_medicine. That's correct, yeah.
That's correct.
And
Yep.
yeah, it's been really great having you on this podcast. Thanks for spending some time with us. And
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm really hoping you can get back out there, educate yourself. Hopefully this thing doesn't last too long. You can get back to
Fingers
it.
crossed.
Fingers crossed. All right, thanks, man.
All right, thanks. Take care.
You too. What's going on? That's going to wrap up the first episode. All right, so you've got 3 different perspectives, 3 different hustlers out there, and I hope you got to learn a little bit from each of them. Got to see a little bit of what they're passionate about, what their goals are, how they set up their goals, how they fulfill them, how they drive themselves. I really want to thank you for taking part in this first step in our journey, and I'd like to invite you all to like the podcast, subscribe if you're on YouTube, subscribe if you're on Anchor, follow us everywhere you can. I've got links in the description. I've got multiple like profile links to each of their respective accounts, and I've also got the different like profiles that they've mentioned in their videos linked. So I want you to check those out, like, subscribe, and I want you also to comment if there's anything that you disagree with them about. If there's any way they could improve their hustle, I want to know about it. I want you to let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you'd do differently. There we go. All right. Peace, everybody. Keep hustling. Love y'all.